Well, I would like to welcome our studio audience and anyone that we have viewing us online to this webinar in Issues in Family Health Communication. Our focus today is augmentative and alternative communication for children with autism. My name is Brooke Hildebrand Kloves. I teach for the Department of Communication Studies. I teach fundamentals of oral communication, intercultural communication, and I'm finishing my Master of Science degree in Health Communication, so I'll be teaching that soon as well. We're here at Southeast Missouri State University, and we are pleased to welcome Krista Davidson. She is a speech pathologist who got her master's degree from Purdue University. She also did some postgraduate work at Purdue with Dr. Lyle Lloyd, who is one of the founders of AAC. She is the augmentative and alternative communication specialist for the Belleville area Special Services Cooperative. She engages in direct therapy as well as consultation for a 24-district cooperative. And in the interest of full disclosure, Krista is also my sister. So I'm pleased to welcome Krista Davidson.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
All right. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of cover some issues regarding AAC, the history of AAC, and then we're going to move into focusing specifically how it deals with children that have autism. And then we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. So first, Krista, can you give us a little bit of the timeline of AAC development?
Sure. Well, families and individuals have always been using some form of AAC, usually some manual signs. We can even remember with our grandparents who had several deaf brothers and sisters that they had their own set of signs that they used to communicate with each other. But the field of AAC really emerged in the 1950s and 60s. And then you can see by all these different acts, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act and so on, that with each of these successively AAC became more prevalent and included more in these acts, especially the amendments that were made in 1997. They specifically targeted AAC. So it has a relatively brief history, I guess, in the whole scheme of things.
Right.
But to me it seems, like it goes back to before I was born. So there's a whole nother timeline that we could talk about too, and that's the invention of the computer. Because as computers became more widely available and got smaller and more affordable, they became integrated into communication devices, and then those became available to people who needed them. And then the biggest revolution in AAC that I've seen so soon in my career is the invention of the iPad in 2010. And that has really changed the scene in augmentative communication. However, I see it as both a pro and a con. A lot of people see it as sort of a panacea, and I think that if you look at it in a systematic way, you'll see that it's not right for all kids, and it's definitely more socially acceptable, and it's more affordable, and a lot of people feel more comfortable using that kind of technology.
Right.
However, you have to look at what fits the child best, and not all apps are created equal. I've talked about apps that are created by speech pathologists and have a lot of research base versus apps that might be created by some guy in his basement, and it's just 4 pictures, but they might be advertised the same way on iTunes, and so you really you still need an evaluation, and you need an SLP, I think, to be involved in the decision-making process when it comes to iPads and apps.
So you can't say, hey, why get this $1,000 device when I could get a $1.99 app, right?
Right. Yeah, you kind of get what you pay for,
right,
when it comes to the apps. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the timeline when it comes to AAC.
Okay, great. Now you mentioned the importance of, choosing the device that's right for the child, that's meeting, the people's needs. So let's talk a little bit about who are the best candidates for AAC.
Okay. Well, and then I have to, of course, say that there are no prerequisites for AAC. So I think that anyone who has little to no functional speech is a candidate for AAC. And as I'll talk about later, even some students who have some oral verbal speech could still be an AAC user. And that AAC doesn't equal a device per se, that it includes low-tech and no-tech solutions as well. A lot of individuals think that it's synonymous with a high-tech device, and it isn't. Did you want me to mention PEXIT?
Yeah, because I think it's really important to mention this idea that it doesn't always equal a device. I remember I had a student who was in a car accident and had a tracheotomy, and I went to visit him, and people were acting like, well, we don't really know what he wants to say. And I was like, well, he's still got cognitive function. And Krista was like, give him a whiteboard and a marker. And sure enough, he started, telling us everything that he wanted to say. And it wasn't like he needed any really special intervention. He just needed,
right,
to be able to write. But now, obviously a whiteboard isn't the solution for everybody, but also sometimes a device isn't. And there have been some low-tech developments.
Yeah, PEX is something that's really well known in the world of autism, picture exchange communication system. And it's the idea of using usually a binder or a board of symbols and creating a sentence and putting them on a strip and then taking that sentence strip to your communication partner. And I think it's a wonderful system, and it certainly is appropriate for certain individuals. However, I've seen some people sort of get stuck like that they have to do PEX. And that's a lot of work to search for your symbol and peel it off and put it on a sentence strip and then peel that off and take it to somebody. And if they need that connection with their communication partner,
that social part of handing it to
if
the person.
And that's something that they're working on, and physically getting all those symbols is something that isn't too taxing on them. But let's, if we have a student who maybe eye contact isn't a problem and making the connection with their partner isn't a problem, but the physical act of doing all those steps, they just give up before they even start, well, that's probably not the right solution for them. But you don't want to get stuck like, well, they have to use PEX, or that's what we do with a child with autism, we have to start with PEX. Well, if they can point to the symbol, that could get them a lot faster response, right, and maybe that more immediate gratification, and then they're going to be more successful. But if they're kind of stuck in the whole, pulling it off and all this Velcro, then, and let's say their vocabulary gets so big, are they going to pull their binder with them in a wagon, behind them? Now, Bondi and Frost, the inventors of PEX, they might disagree with what I'm saying, I'm sure, but that's just something that I think you have to think in a practical way as well, and look at the student that you're working with.
And you mentioned how sometimes it could maybe even be too taxing for them to do all of that work. Let's talk about folks that maybe don't have the skills for keyboarding.
Sure. Well, and I was going to mention that there is a wonderful book called Every Move Counts, and now it's called Every Move Counts, Clicks, and Chats. And Corsten, Foss, and Barry have put together something for maybe children who seem very severe, and you're in sort of an interest inventory to see, do they turn their head to look at something, or do smells or lights, get their attention? I mean, what are their reactions? You're looking very closely at how they respond to any sort of stimuli, and that is meaningful. Crying is communication. Mm-hmm. Not that we want them to cry, of course, but just looking at anything that they might do that you can then systematically shape into a communicative response. Mm-hmm. So, and that is a wonderful resource. And I've used it even with children who would be considered severe, as well as I recently did it with a child who has autism, just because you get stuck in the same thing. Well, he likes these gummies and he likes this toy. Well, let's see what else he likes. If we're kind of in this, and kind of stagnating in our therapy, well, let's see. And he did. He responded to some tastes and some smells and things that she hadn't really considered before. So it could be used in a lot of different ways. But I think that if you see some people, when they see a child who's just laying and they can't move their arms or their legs and they can't eat and all these different things that make you just think, well, what do they really do? Well, they can do something.
Right. And this kind of goes with your idea of, when we think about folks, they may be nonverbal, they may have limited verbal abilities, they may, be classified as, in the severe category, but you always presume competence.
Right. So, and that's the safest assumption, is to presume competence. To go in and thinking that they can't. If you think that they can't or you think that they can, well, you're right.
Right.
So you have to presume competence and just have high expectations, because when you lower your expectations, then it's just not fair. It's not fair to anyone. And so I was also going to say that with AAC, it's all different diagnoses. It's autism, it's cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, severe apraxia of speech, all different degenerative diseases, and of all abilities. I have kids who are of average intelligence, who use AAC, as well as students who, have some cognitive impairment. So there's no prerequisites.
Right. So AAC isn't just for the folks that you're feeling like, wow, this kid is really bright, we should give him AAC. This is for kids that have cognitive impairments as well.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
And when I was thinking of some ideas for our talk today, I thought, some kids, they really make my job easy. They take right to AAC. They navigate their devices. They're eager to communicate. And that's great. But the responsibility to find a way for all kids to communicate, and adults as well, lies with the team. It lies with the adults, the families, the teachers, the SLPs, OTs, PTs, music therapy, whoever's involved with them. The responsibility lies with us. I mean, yes, the child is part of that team as well, but it's just so often I hear, well, they don't want to use it. Well, they're 5. They might not want to brush their teeth. Are you making it motivating? Are you making it worth their while? Turn and look at yourself, and don't put the blame on the child as to why it's not working. There's something that you can do, I have danced silly. I have brought all kinds of toys. I have run around a room. I've done all different things.
Polish nails. I remember it had one gal that liked you to polish
Sure,
nails.
we've done that. I bring in, videos, baby pictures, whatever they like, the cardinals, whatever it is, we can find a way, and it's up to us to do that.
Excellent. Well, now that we've talked a little bit about who are good candidates for AAC, which is pretty broad,
Yes.
and the timeline, we're going to move into narrowing into children with autism now. And we're going to talk a little bit about how AAC benefits children who have autism. My PowerPoint, there we go. So what do you see being the benefits of using AAC for children with an autism diagnosis?
Well, if that child is having difficulty with communication, and they have, we're noticing that their language development is delayed, and that is usually, it's pretty common with autism. We want to try some different AUGCOM techniques, and I think a great benefit is that children with autism frequently are visual learners, and so AAC provides a visual, a visual for language. It's a visual representation of language, and that really can be the key that unlocks a lot for kids with autism.
Okay.
It helps them to be included in a special ed classroom or in a regular ed classroom. How are they going to participate if they don't have a way to express what they know and answer questions that the teacher may be asking. And I'm sorry that most of my experiences are obviously in a school setting, so
right.
I'm of course speaking to a classroom and that type of environment. Also with literacy, giving the representation of the letters, to hear the words, to hear the sounds, to see them spell. I mean, most device, if you're talking about a high-tech device, it's going to have a keyboard. Although low-tech devices, we have alphabet, boards and pages. It just, again, it's the visual to bridge the gap for literacy or for social communication. Obviously, having, being independent in your communication, you're more independent, but that's something as well.
Okay. And then, you know, a lot of times when we talk about children with autism, they like structure, they like schedules. Does AAC kind of provide that for them?
Yes, because it's going to be the same. There's a predictability. You know, here's my device, or here's my board, and those symbols are going to be there, and tomorrow they'll be there, and the next day they'll be there. And I'm a big proponent of something called language acquisition through motor planning, which has been very successful with students with autism. And it's the idea of keeping things in the same place, and there's a motor plan for where those are. Just like we all have motor plans when we type, or when we, you know, go into our house and we flip the light switch, or when we drive our car. You know, we don't think too much about where the, you know, the turn signal is, or our cruise control. So we all have motor plans, and you can make a motor plan for language as well. And we have motor plans when we're speaking, where our tongue is moving. Those are all motor plans. And so if you have a device where things stay consistent, they can have a motor plan for language as well on an AAC device or board. Another great thing about that is if they have a way to communicate and let individuals know what they want or what they're unhappy about, we might see a decrease in negative behaviors instead of acting out and, you know, throwing themselves on the floor or running from the room. They may be able to communicate better as